shift right now. Humanity is facing a lot of crisis, and one of the main subjects is our monetary system, money. And as I know that you are experts, I would like to ask, why is money so important for us? What has happened that it became the most important thing in the world? And is there a way out of this? Can we also live without money? So that's a lot. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is so important, money is so important, because today there is hardly anything. You cannot survive without money. I mean, to have a roof above your head, to have water to drink, to have food to eat, what it takes to even the basic things of life, we don't take for granted anymore. They all have to be bought with money. And I think so money is like the one of the first things for survival. And this is why if we talk about changes in the money system, people get very, very cautious. That's my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all that's true. And I think that this question goes even deeper, because you can ask, well, why has the whole world turned into money? You know, why is money so important? One reason has to do with the way that money is designed to always grow, to always convert everything into itself, converting nature into commodities, converting relationships into services. And you can ask, well, why does it do that? And one reason has to do with interest. But I think that it's part of something deeper as well, because it's not just in the monetary realm that we're converting the world into numbers. That's also the ambition of science. You can take it all the way back to Galileo, who basically said the world is composed of two different qualities. There's primary qualities and secondary qualities. The primary qualities are the ones that you can measure, such as distance, weight, things like that. Secondary qualities are the ones that you can't measure, like color or odor. And these things aren't as real. So the ambition of science became to convert the secondary into the primary, to find some way to measure everything. And the goal was to someday extend the realm of number to include everything and do everything scientifically by the numbers. And so you could say that money is an echo of this scientific program, or another aspect of it. And I think that the crisis in money is related to all of our other crises in technology and in this whole program of mastering the world.
Yes, I fully agree with this. I think that is one of the characteristics of this time, where the crisis is so deep that we know if we cannot resolve this, our very survival is threatened. And therefore, we look at money from 1,000 different sides, from psychology, from science, from history, from economics too, you know. So it's like, in the last 4 years, I've been working in this topic for 30 years, but in the last 4 years, what has come about and different perspectives, looking at money and dealing with money and suggesting new ways of dealing with money, is more than the 26 years beforehand. So 2008, with the first crisis in the money system, came about a real evaluation of what we are actually dealing with this phenomenon. And I find it totally fascinating how even normal people who so far have taken everything for granted, they work, they earn money, they get older, they get their pension and so on, how they now know that their pension isn't sure anymore, whether they are going to have work tomorrow isn't sure anymore, whether they can feed their children, whether they can educate their children and so on. Everything is being put into question because of the insecurity we have with money keeping its value, with money being available at the right time, in the right place, and so on. So what I have been looking at for the last 10 years now is there something wrong with the basic design of money? And are there other ways of designing money? And being an architect by profession, this comes very close to, how can you say that, to a new field of creative activities. And I find money to be one of the most neglected areas of creative thinking. So this is why I feel very happy to have conferences like this, where we can meet each other, where we can discuss with each other, and where we can look at the possibilities there are, and to find people who are listening and who are really interested and who you can learn from. What do they understand? Where do they reject your ideas, and so on? So it's an incredibly interesting and fascinating time.
Yeah.
Because of this new look at money.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting that the creative thinking, a lot of it's coming from people like you who aren't really economists.
But you know why?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
I
because
mean, if you are an economist and we both question the validity of interest,
right,
as a mechanism to keep money in circulation and to pass money on and so on. But if you would question that, if you were an economist, or if you would study economics, or if you wanted to be a banker, and you say, well, I want to work in this bank because it's doing good work, but I'm not so sure about the interest system.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would leave the bank tomorrow. You would have to leave the bank tomorrow. So for what I found out in the 30 years I'm dealing with this, if bankers really understand what we are talking about, they are in grave danger of having to leave their profession.
Yeah.
And I have one case which I know of where the banker had to leave. He was a director of a bank. He had to leave his job because he saw that he could not change anything that he felt was necessary. And he now works in counseling people with debt.
Interesting.
Yes, it's really interesting.
Although in my research I came across some papers from Federal Reserve economists. Yeah. So they're like really in the system, you know. But they write some pretty interesting papers that are out there, you know. But it's kind of almost like they're like kind of speculative, and everybody says, "Oh yeah, you know, Dr. So-and-so writes the speculative stuff." Yeah. But it's almost like these thoughts are happening in the unconscious of the economists and bankers, you know.
Yeah, and those who are recognized and who have a name and who are still talking about this and showing alternatives, they are not recognized by the profession. Like Michael Hudson had to publish his new book himself. Bernard Lietaer has been for years been shunned by the professionals because he's showing so clearly that what they are doing isn't working. It is only the worst thing. I think the worst thing is that it does work in the short term and maybe the medium term, but never in the long run. So so the economists have sort of settled in saying, well, you know, it goes up and down and up and down. Like in nature, we have our good times, we have our bad times, so why not in the money system as well? Instead of understanding that this is a totally artificial system, which we have created, and we can change it. And we can change it to become a permanent system that serves us rather than we serving it, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
So can you address another big issue with money? The relation between money and power on one side and money and love on the other side. As I have heard, there are only very, very few people who really have an interest in keeping this system because they make a lot of money by this interest. Who are these people, by the way? And on the other hand, money is also, if it's can also give opportunity to do something with love, sharing. You're talking of gift culture. Can you talk a bit about this?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Money and power versus money and love. So money's very intimately related to power. I mean, obviously, when you look around the world and you ask what makes the world go round, it's obviously money. There's a reason for that. I guess kind of on a conceptual level, money gives you the power to make people do things that they don't really want to do, because they need money to survive. And this is the way it's worked for a very long time. It's really debt that gives you this power, because it says, and because debt is related to coercive mechanisms of various sorts. In the old days, if you didn't pay your debts, you could become my slave. Your children would be sold into slavery, and you would be forced to devote all of your produce, all of your productivity toward whatever end I want you to. And today, many people are still under this debt pressure, which prevents them from doing the things that they really want to do in the world. So in that sense, and it's a very primal sense, money is power. It's the power to compel you to do my bidding. And writ large, that's the way the world runs. We have a planet full of people, many of them not doing what their heart really wants them to do. Money is, in a way, anti-love, because if love is the feeling that your happiness is my happiness, your pain is my pain, you're not separate from me, you're part of me. That's what love is. When, as they say, you're only as happy as your least happy child. That's certainly true with me. So love is this feeling of oneness with somebody, and money pushes us apart. It throws us into competition. It severs ties between us, unlike gifts, which create ties. Money keeps us separate. So you could say money is anti-love. Of course, you can use money to express love. Also, you can use money as a gift and give people the gift of money and create ties again. So love is ultimately more powerful than money. It underlies everything. But today, money is very much anti-love.
Well, I think there are two researchers, scientists, who have given me an insight into the relationship between money and power. And one is called Paul C. Martin. He wrote a book, I forget the title, but the essence of the book is that the idea that money was invented to facilitate exchange is a totally ridiculous idea. He says money was invented to secure a realm of territory for yourself and to be able to pay soldiers. Mm-hmm. That's why you have on most of the coins the heads of an empire, or the old coins. And he is somebody who collects coins, and this is how he thought. And I think that's a very interesting idea, but more interesting even than that is what Christine von Braun now, she wrote a book about money and civilization, and what she found that at the same time where you pay people to kill other people if they transgress a borderline or whatever, to keep this territory to yourself, it also is being used, money is being used to pay women to become prostitutes, to sell love in quotation marks. So money is at the same time the absolute contrast to love, in that it was invented in order to keep power and in order to have power over the other person. I find this is an interesting idea. These two ways that at the same time money came into existence, people were paid to kill and women were paid to sell their body. And I think it changes a bit the way we can think about money, and this is why I feel that we need to find a way to express through money different priorities. Like, for instance, when you design a currency for health, where what is being rewarded is preventative medicine, or when you design a currency that helps education, what you can show is how instead of the leverage of monetary profit, our money system is at the moment, the main goal is to make more money out of money. So everything social, ecological, cultural has a very hard time getting money. And so if you can show that we can design money for fulfilling other goals and leveraging, making better use for this particular goal, better education, better health, and so on, then you suddenly begin to open up a whole new realm for money, and also to do with money those things that are important to us. This is why I think that what we need to do is to free people from the idea that this money system is all there is and nothing else.
Yeah, and that requires a really deep excavation of our money system and our attitudes around money, because it goes back, as you were saying, thousands of years.
Yes.
David Graeber writes about this too.
Right.
How there was this kind of complex involving conquest, mining, and slavery, where to pay the armies you needed coins. To get the coins you needed to mine gold and silver. To do that you needed slaves. To get the slaves you needed conquest.
Yes.
And like this goes back thousands of years, But he also talks about another origin of money, which was, he said originally, it was a social currency. And you would use it, it was like the special thing, and you wouldn't use it to trade in goods and services. But you would use it as like a kind of a sacred or special gift to facilitate the rearrangement of human relationships. So marriage, for example. Or maybe if I, killed somebody in a fight or by accident, then I would pay blood money, or to cement a bond of friendship. And he says the problem came when this medium of social, of social relationships also became used for goods and services, and that caused all kinds of problems. But it does kind of touch on this kind of sacred origin to money.
Yes.
Originally it was a kind of a gift. And I think that, when we reinvent money systems and we get that idea, we could create money to be different than it is today. I like to think of it in terms of reconnecting it with what's sacred to us.
Yes.
Like, for example, like you were saying, like education, health, and especially the healing of the planet, the healing of the ecosystems.
This is what I like about having, instead of interest, having a fee on money, which would make it practically only relatively possible to have money that keeps its value. And if you have that kind of money, then to plant a tree suddenly is a competition for that kind of money. Right now, the money is growing so fast that no tree can even compete with money. But what I also think is very, very important is to look at, the situation we're in, the crisis we're in. It's not the first time we have a crisis of debt, of overpowering debt, of suffocating debt for people to work for and to slave, the slavery type of work that needs to be introduced in order to pay for the debt. We have this for 5,000 years, and I think the rules being created by all the religions. We are in very good company, actually, with all the great religious leaders of the world. We have, what they have said is really helping to rectify the situation. For instance, in Babylon, under Hammurabi, you can now, when you read their tablets, they have the story how debt was released, how people were freed of debt, and how they would, the land even would be returned to the community, because land and money are very closely linked. And so I think what we really need to look at, how in Islam, how in Christianity, how in Judaism, this problem was being dealt with, and how we can use these recipes today to get out of the situation we're in. I think that's a very, very important discovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened so many times in ancient Greece as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Rome.
in ancient Athens.
Yeah.
The people were going into debt, and they had to pawn their land, their children, and eventually themselves. Yeah. And that became a big crisis, created social pressure, and there weren't recruits for the army anymore because only citizens could be in the army, not slaves. And it was just a big mess. And so Solon came, and he did some monetary reforms and returned the land to its original owners. And you know, we need to do something like that today because debt is overtaking everything. And I'm not sure what the modern version of it would be. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I'm sympathetic with just wiping it all off. You know, everybody go to zero, because
reset.
Yeah.
Reset the
Reset.
computer.
Yep.
Like we said,
Yep.
reset the computer. We
Right.
reset the system.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be really dislocating. You know, that would mean that your grandmother's life savings are wiped out as well. So I don't know. There are other ways to do it too. Involving
inflation is a proven
inflation,
way, you know.
Right? Yep, inflation, or in a more gentle way, the kind of negative interest currency that you were mentioning.
Yeah, that would help.
There's lots of ways to do it,
Yeah.
but we have to do something. Otherwise, we know what the future is. You know, where everybody becomes a debt peon, except for a very few on top.
But we're already in the middle of what I call the apocalypse. The apocalypse means to lift the veil. And we lift the veil over the whole financial system. Like, you know, that the Libor scandal, that Barclays Bank had to pay $450 million fine. And once they paid the fine, they said, well, we were working together with people from the Bank of England and people from the Federal Reserve. And suddenly you see the whole system is being how can you say that? It's being made criminal. You see the criminal energy which this money system allows to proliferate. And this is why I think we need a money system that doesn't allow this, that will reduce money to the function it should actually have, and that is to serve us, and not to us to serve the money system, which it is right now, which the situation is right now. So my feeling is this is one of the most interesting times in history, because we have had debt crises of considerable size, but we never had a worldwide debt crisis where practically the whole world is going to be influenced. And I recently read a paper where somebody proved that within 3 weeks, the whole world economy could come to a grinding halt. Because once the money doesn't flow anymore, the goods don't flow anymore. And there may be a whole factory in Germany standing still because a screw from China is missing because of the money flow that doesn't. So it's like we are in incredible danger, and I feel this incredible danger also makes possible incredible solutions and incredible ideas to proliferate. And like, you know, we are together for a day, but last night we were sitting with 3 people in front of an audience here in Munich, and without ever having talked about it or agreed on, it was just like a tried performance, you know, helping to understand what we can do and so on. So I think with the technology we have of communication and for instance, what I feel is, for me, is the most hopeful thought. But Paul Hawkins said that all over the world we have millions of NGOs, and he calls these NGOs the immune system of humanity. In other words, they go where something goes wrong, like in the immune system. They don't have to agree with each other beforehand. They don't have to form large organizations with structures and all this sort of thing. They They just do what is necessary, and the underlying values are the same: to save nature, to save human beings from being enslaved, and so on. And my feeling is that this immune system is really at work right now, and I'm very happy to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, when you were speaking, I was just thinking of, like, it never ceases to amaze me, like what you're saying, like the whole world economy could freeze in 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
Because of when you take away money from it.
Mm-hmm.
But money is the one thing that we don't, that doesn't have to be scarce. I mean, it's just
Exactly.
electronic bits, you know?
Yes.
I mean, we could have all of the know-how, all of the labor, all of the materials, all of everything, but for the lack of this non-material thing,
Yeah.
we can't do anything.
It's crazy.
It's
Isn't
crazy.
it?
Michael
Absolutely
Linton has a good
Yeah.
metaphor to explain it. He says, imagine that you wanted to build a house, and everybody wants to build a house, and you've got all the nails, you've got all the wood, you've got all the carpenters, you've got everything, but you can't do it because you don't have any inches.
A meter.
Right, you don't have any meters, you don't have any centimeters. Like that's the one thing that you can create yourself. You don't need, it's not a real thing. It's just a measure. Really, money is just a measure. And
it has other functions. This is the problem. and the one function which serves this very small group of people. By the way, I don't agree with you with the question. Is that it's only this small group of people who profits from the system is keeping us from changing it. This is a ridiculous idea, and this happens again and again. That people come up, but we know who is behind all this. Well, my experience is that of the 90% of I would say 99% of the people who pay more than their fair share in the system, let's say 90%. 90% of them don't understand how it even works. And of the 10% who profit from the system, I would say 0.01% really knows how it works and wants to keep it. I bet, I will go to any bet, if of the 10%, if these 10% who profit from the system were giving a choice of a stable system where they would not profit anymore, but they would not lose, or they would lose moderately, and keeping the system going and losing everything in the end, they would choose the stable system. But they're not given the choice. We don't discuss the choice publicly. In politics now, it is very fashionable to beat the banks. It's the bad banks. They are doing exploiting us. They are doing all the wrong things, and it's the bankers. And the bankers say, no, it's the politicians because they have spent too much. Well, you can prove that it's not the politicians, that the banks. The banks have 3 times the amount of debt right now that the governments have, the countries have in Europe. So it is a far higher percentage there. It is that we are not ready yet, but it's coming, to discuss publicly what are the choices we have. And I'm entirely happy, and I think this should be a historic event. The Bundesverband des deutschen Mittelstandes. This is an association of the German small and medium-sized businesses. They had a meeting last week, basically, where they invited those people who had suggested a parallel currency in Greece, so that Greece could stay in the euro and have its own currency for the internal trade. And since one of the chief economists of the German bank also published a proposal like that, he came into the discussion, and some of the top people who talk about alternatives were there, and they decided in the end that they would continue with this discussion publicly and would take up the proposal and write about it and research it and so on. So I think this to me is the first time I have the feeling we're moving right into the mainstream discussion now, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to give the impression that I think that it's the fault of the banks or the fault of anybody in power, because they're just playing a role that's created by the system.
Exactly.
Even like the most greedy Wall Street bankers, I mean, or London bankers, I mean, really, like their greed itself is a product of the system.
Exactly.
And if they weren't doing it, somebody else would be doing it because it's a necessity. And even if you say, well, there wasn't this kind of greed 30 years ago, that's partly a result of this desperate chase for returns that is happening as basic economic growth slows down. And no matter where you look, you can always blame somebody else. You know, the bondholders. Well, they're mostly, you know, representing big pension funds and institutional investors, and
like your grandmother and
yeah.
my grandmother.
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
on.
yeah. Yeah.
So there are no goodies and baddies.
Right.
Everybody is in both.
And what you're saying, though, I think, like about the veil being lifted, that happens more when things stop working.
Exactly.
You know, when things are still working, or when you even can pretend that they're still working, then you're not going to really look behind the veil. But at some point, you have almost no choice. Yeah. And I think that we're entering that time right now.
Yeah. I'm so happy I can still experience this, you know, because I wasn't sure whether it would happen during my lifetime. And that is, and so, but people ask all the time, but when is it going to break down? Well, I think there is no way you can predict this, because as long as there is a little part in the world where the interest can still be accumulated and so on, and where there's still enough to invest, it may go on. But my feeling is it can happen any moment. It can take another 1 or 2 years. Nobody knows. But I'm feeling the sense of urgency is more is mounting.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like this rope that's being pulled tighter and tighter.
Yes.
And when it's loose, it takes a big cut to sever the rope. But as it gets tighter and tighter, it just takes a little tap. And we're getting to that point where it could be any crisis, any geopolitical event, a natural disaster, you know, and that could snap the rope and plunge us into crisis almost overnight. Or it could be a few years. You know, the authorities right now, they're doing their best to keep the machine going a little longer. They even call it pretend and extend. Yeah, pretend and extend. You know, let's pretend that everything's fine and extend the system, extend the debts, and try to keep growth going, or maybe even start new growth so that we can grow our way out of debt and keep the system going. But more growth can only come at a very painful cost, you know, like the Albertan tar sands, you know, or finishing off the rest of the fish in the ocean, or fracking, you know. And I think that's one reason why the environmental movement is connected to the financial crisis. You know, the ecological crisis and the financial crisis are connected.
And it will not go away with a Green New Deal this time.
No, not if the goal is sustainable growth. Yeah, that's already an oxymoron.
This is what I find with a lot of ecologists, that they think if everything was just put into green industry, into green technology, we would be wonderful off. Well, we will not be wonderful off, because what we found is that every invention or every bit of ecology also costs energy, also creates secondary circles of destruction and so on. So it's, I think we have put ourselves into a very tight corner where all that we can really do is to look at fundamental change, finally.
Well, you know, the most important green technology is conservation, which means simply using less.
Yes.
And that is fundamentally counter to economic growth. Yeah. And therefore, it intensifies the money crisis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much.